Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the podcast. I've got a fantastic guest for you today, Len May, coming out of Los Angeles, California. And he is a healthcare leader. He's also a trailblazer in personalized medicine, something I've been really interested in. And he's the CEO and co founder of EndoDNA. We'll find out more all about what it is. And I'm really happy to delve into the episode. So, Len, welcome.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So I know, talk about your background and how you started EndoDNA.
Yeah, it's a long story. I'll try to make it short, but I was the kind of kid that would sit in class and the teacher would call me and my mind was elsewhere. So I was always like daydreaming or if I'm bored in class, I would be disruptive talking all the time. So at some point, my parents took me to the doctor. I got diagnosed with ADD, attention deficit disorder. I wasn't hyperactive. I was not stimulated enough in school. So they put me on medication. That's what doctors did at that time. You have a diagnosis, you got a medication. I can't say it didn't work per se, but it actually made me not feel meaty, like numb my sense of self. But it did stimulate some maybe dopamine and serotonin. But I was going to school and there was some kids hanging out. They asked me if I want to smoke a cigarette. So I was like, yeah, sure. I'm hanging out with cool kids. I'll smoke a cigarette. I'll be one of the cool kids. So I never questioned why they had one cigarette, but they had one cigarette. They passed it along. I took a drag. Didn't taste like a cigarette to me. And then so I took another one and they were laughing. What? So they put cannabis in the cigarette. And I went back to class and all the windows in my head sort of narrowed and I could focus. So I never said anything to anybody, but over the years, I would start consuming cannabis and I got off my prescription medication. It became my medicine, even though I never said anything because it was just quote unquote recreational or whatever. And my parents kept catching me over the years. And at some point when I was just about 18, they ended up calling the police on me and kicking me out of the house for my cannabis use, which was my medicine. The irony of this whole thing, but both my parents consume formulations that my company had patents on now for their conditions. So fast forward, I was going to university. I was a physical therapy major, and I was trying to learn as much as I can about cannabis. And I got a job at Tower Records, which some of your younger listeners may not know what it is. It's a record store which sold things that we put on record players like vinyl, which is behind me. If you see the video, if you participate in video, or CDs, cassettes, all these different things. So I got a chance to go to a festival working Tower Records, and these kids had this banner said Cannabis Action Network. So I asked them what they were doing. They said they're registering people to vote. So what else are you doing? They weren't doing anything. So I became the president of the Cannabis Action Network. I held a rally. I was in Philadelphia, where I was from. And this woman who was federally getting cannabis, which is ironic because it's Schedule 1, but the federal government did have people, like 16 people at the time, that were getting federally prescribed cannabis under the NIDA USDA program with cannabis that was cultivated in Mississippi. And that she had a jar of pre-rolled cannabis cigarettes with a USDA label that she lit up in front of federal rangers in Independence Hall, where the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence are, both on hemp paper, by the way. And the irony of the story is, or the funny thing is, everybody stayed over my house that night. And in the morning, we got woken up to loud noise. So LV Masika, who's the person who was my keynote, she walked into a sculpture in my house and broke it. And it was loud. She felt really bad, but she had degenerative glaucoma and she was blind. She couldn't see until she made it medicated with cannabis. So I was like, wait a second. It works for my ADD. It works for her glaucoma. I don't understand. It's a plant. How does it work for different things? So I started really diving in. Fast forward, I went into corporate America. I worked for PwC. I worked for a venture capital company. As I mentioned prior to this, I was a commercial real estate broker for a while, moved to Los Angeles and got involved in the dispensary business. I was an owner and operator, partner in the dispensary business. And one of the things that I started seeing was two people will consume the same cannabis varietal and have a completely different experience. I got into plant genomics first, started sequencing the plant, and then human genomics. And then the concept for EndoDNA at that time was to bring those two together and help guide individuals to mitigate or avoid possible adverse events that they may be genetically predisposed to. So that was my first foray in launching EndoDNA. We have a patented test. One of the many things that we do, but or we first started, and our test is the patent is for the use of DNA to make recommendations associated with the endocannabinoid system provided through a graphical user interface. So that's how we started. And that's my background in the genomic space, and I can expand from there.
Yeah, really interesting. So talking about it is this idea of cannabis. And so this cannabis is slowly making its way, but why was it banned for so long? Why did the government say marijuana is illegal and they're promoting all these other like big pharma, they're promoting all their medications. What's going on there? It sounds from reading it like it's cannabis is safer, cheaper, easier, but it sounds like big pharma didn't want to allow that. And so what talk about that?
There's many reasons why. So the first reason why is in 1937 Marijuana Stamp Tax Act that was initiated by William Randolph Hearst of the Hearst newspaper dynasty with a person named Harry Anslinger, who was actually appointed by officials to be able to institute this tax act. So what was happening was that a lot of farmers were cultivating hemp. Hemp was used World War I and our forefathers for clothing, for the military uniforms, for rope, for ships, paper. And William Randolph Hearst partnered with DuPont to create chemicals to make paper out of wood and also synthetic clothing. So this was a major competitor to them. So they used their influence to try to get rid of the hemp industry. The other thing that was happening was that migrant farmers coming from Mexico were bringing marijuana, which was the name that they used for cannabis, and also providing that to jazz musicians at the time. And there was a lot of racism that was happening at the time because they didn't want their white daughters dancing in the juke joints and all that other stuff. And so this was a lot of suppression. So that 1937 Marijuana Tax Act was the first time that they were taxing people and trying to prosecute people for cultivating cannabis and hemp. But what happened was during the Richard Nixon presidency, they came out with this scheduling of different the Drug Enforcement Agency and also racism, anti-Semitism, all kinds of different things were used. And we know this for a fact because Richard Nixon recorded himself saying these things. So I'm not saying anything that anybody doesn't know. You can go on YouTube and listen to this. But the advisory committee advised him that cannabis is safe, but he ended up having it Scheduled 1. So that's the irony of it. And the federal government does have a patent on cannabis as a neuroprotectant. So it's really odd. So there's a lot of political reasons. And Big Pharma also lobbied for this for a long time, even though they were able to synthesize THC and create different products like Marinol, for instance. But because you don't have the other components of the plant, it wasn't as efficacious for what they wanted to do, sedative, but didn't really have that girdle production for the munchies that we wanted to see in the AIDS and cancer patients, which it was used for at the time.
Yeah, really interesting. And the more I delve into this area of longevity and kind of outside the bounds of the traditional industrial medical complex is health insurance and hospitals. They do have their role, but I think in the case of like where everybody's like having chronic problems, I don't think the modern, quote, modern healthcare system is sufficient. People getting more obese and like Alzheimer's and all these different types of allergies. So one thing is interesting is in this umbrella of longevity, you've got personalized medicine, precision medicine, genomic medicine. What kind of give a overall, what are the differences for the audience?
I think you said it exactly right on. There's sick care and there's health care. So the United States participates in sick care, which allows the number one subscription model in the world to be able to get on this hamster wheel of, we'll give you a pill for the symptom that we're seeing expressed instead of going like Ayurvedic medicine or any other kind of medicine that looks at the root cause of what's creating the dis-ease. So I'm a big believer in understanding your own GPS of life. So how do we start with that? We start with your whole genome. We look at your genome, and the endocannabinoid system is just one of the tests. We have many different tests that we do, but the genome is important because it allows you to see where your personal potholes are in the road. So you're not locked into your genetics. You can control based on lifestyle, your epigenetic expression. And that's extremely important to know. So once you understand that, you can then create a treatment plan or a protocol to mitigate the expression of those epigenetic markers, and also to create a personalized precision healthcare protocol that is geared to the individual. And the most important part of that is the feedback loop. Okay, just because I have Christopher's genome and I have a protocol or an interactive treatment plan that's specific to you, like how do I measure that it's actually working? One of the things is your biological age. So we can actually look at your genetic markers associated, your epigenetic markers associated with your biological age. So I've done a bunch of them. Like I love Stephen Horvath's algorithm on the Clock Foundation. So I'm 52. I'm biologically 47. My goal is to get me down to 40. Here's my protocol. So how do I know that it's working for me? So I can get biomarkers from my blood. I can get my wearable device data, but it's all this data. But today, what makes it exciting is because we can use machine learning to be able to disseminate that data and get it more honed into the individual. So under HIPAA, I can't say, it's Christopher's personal information, but what I can do is say, there's 100 people with similar genotype to you that used this specific protocol and it showed efficacy. So the 101st person, a healthcare professional, it'll show maybe this is the protocol that may work for this individual. So it bookends the experience and we get real precision therapeutics, precision healthcare, because we're actually able to do this for individuals based on those algorithms. And the AI is accelerating this, 1,000-fold.
Yeah, interesting. The next question I have for you is this whole area is so fascinating because basically it could be a blood test and it can look at a lot of markers that are not traditionally looked at. It could be a kind of screening. And so my question for you is, let's say there is a kind of like an iPhone moment for this technology. What do you see the modern people are going to just basically go to the hospital if they're dying basically, or they need some acute trauma or something, but most of the care being at home. And what does this do for doctors? They get paid based on patient volume and what they order and these tests. What's going to happen?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're at a delta and a crossroads in the way healthcare should be done. And I think the more doctors that I speak with on a daily basis, they're getting fed up with insurance. And my daughter had to go back to college. She had to go get a form at her doctor. It's a 15-minute visit. And it's the same thing they did in the 50s. We'll palpate, we'll listen to you a little bit, we'll hit the mallet on the knee a little bit. I'm like, we're done with the sheep model. Get out of the queue and get personalized. And I think COVID illuminated this, what we're doing right now. You can have a conversation with a healthcare professional, but the whole take 2 of these and call me in the morning has to go away. Why am I taking 2? Why am I not taking 1? Why am I not taking 4? I metabolize differently than you. So this is the collaboration with the patient and healthcare professional. That's going to be a huge change. This is a partnership for you to be able to address different healthcare concerns before they express themselves. So my elbow hurts. Don't give me a shot in my elbow. See what's causing the pain to begin with, because the pain is a signal of something else. So that is sick care expand to a real, true precision wellness model. And yes, home care is going to be a big part of it. Diagnostics are going to get much better. And then you can collaborate with your healthcare professional and supplement personally for you what it is that you may need. So in order for you, you're absolutely right. Surgeons and acute care in a moment that is still extremely important. And that's not what we're trying to replace. What we're trying to replace is the healthcare system the way it is now, the burden on the healthcare system with people that are continually being sick and also sick from the medication they're taking. I'll give you a quick example of this. So I was talking to a very successful CEO who had a really bad business deal, something that happened, and he was depressed. After he's doing his DNA test, it was clear he had some depression markers that were triggered, but he went to a psychopharmacologist and he was given an antidepressant. He was driving in the Los Angeles area, taking his kid to a soccer game with his wife. And as he's driving, I started getting this feeling that I can just drive off the cliff. And it was such a strong feeling that I had to pull over. And I came out of the car. And my wife is like, "Are you okay?" And he goes, "No, I'm not okay. I should not be driving. You drive." And then we did his genomics test. We realized that all the medication the medication he was prescribed was in the red. It wasn't right for him. So he had treatment-resistant depression, which is genetic. He was given a drug that actually triggered the side effects that were much worse than his depression anyway. And this is something that has to be stopped. Like, we have to look at people individually and not give them a pill for the side effects, but actually work with them to create a protocol that's specific to them. And with the machine learning algorithm, we can learn where those potholes on the road for other people to be able to prevent that from happening. So this is what I believe the future of healthcare is really that. It's really speaking to maybe or maybe not your avatar, the Christopher avatar. The avatar will give you your personalized protocol. You go get the labs, you upload your labs, it'll say, adjust this, adjust that. And you're going to speak to your healthcare professional just like this and say, "You know what, based on all your markers, you're doing this. Let's make those adjustments for you so we can live not just a longer life till 120, so we can have a longer health span." And you brought up longevity. I'm a huge, I don't know, biohacker, whatever you want to call it. David Sinclair, I engulf all that information. And there's different schools of thoughts. We talk about biological age. Biological age is tricky because my liver's age can be different than the age of my heart, can be different than the age of my endocrine system, etc. So we have to treat individuals in their components and then the whole thing. So what can we do to make sure that we fix the longevity of our liver versus our endocrine system versus that? So these are the things I think are going to be fascinating. And because it's so overwhelming, so much data, AI is going to help revolutionize all that, I feel.
Yeah. And how do you get over this regulatory and bureaucratic hurdle from the government? And obviously, the government wants to see private health insurance, succeed and make everybody sick, and our food supply, and the pharma industry, and make people dependent on that. So, and of course, anything that kind of disrupts that, they're gonna try and knock out. So, how do you fight that?
Yeah, it's going to have to be, it's a huge question. It has to come from the individuals. Like, the self-insured employer space is probably first. Once you start understanding, and look, we work with people from all over the world. We're a global company, and socialized medicine in Canada, you're still getting the sick care. People pay for their services. They're getting that preventative and that real health care. So there's going to be a dichotomy. And unfortunately, we always have this class system because people that can't afford it are going to be stuck in the queue. And this is going to have to change. If I was in a call with a bunch of the providers and they were talking about their number one concern that they have, and their number one concern is the price of insulin. They're trying to get the price of insulin down. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking and I'm waiting to ask a question. I'm just a fly on the wall listening. But I asked if I could ask something. And I said, would it make sense that your initiative should be on prevention of diabetes rather than finding a really cheap insulin so you can continue the sick care? And they started talking about the programs they have, but it didn't make any real sense. So we, first of all, as consumers, second of all, as healthcare professionals, need to step out and say, we're going to really look at this as real healthcare. because we can still generate revenue for ourselves. We can generate way more revenue for ourselves probably than the insurance reimbursement market because we're looking at precision medicine, personalized supplementation, all these different protocols. And it really makes sense to start looking outside of this. And the more of us that are in this camp, the more I think we can do for individuals and maybe lobby and change laws. The pharmaceutical industry is not going to be on board, but they're going to be on board eventually because they're going to see that there is a lot of revenue there that'll leave it on the table.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, especially again, I joke around the surest way to mess up an industry is for government to get involved. And, but like you change, for example, the NRA and just the damage that they've done and like they've been out silently ousted and just things, there are movements when it's time change happens. Hopefully healthcare in my lifetime or yours will, we'll see change, but it's great that you're doing it. And Mark Cuban's doing a lot of great things, disrupt that industry and keep up the great work. And how can people find you and contact you and follow you?
Yeah, we're the name of the company is EndoDNA. So it's EndoDNA.com. Right now, we have tests for your endocannabinoid system, as I mentioned. We have a female hormone health test called menopause biotype, a male hormone health test, skin, mental health, genomic test. We even have a canine test, and it's all saliva based, so buccal swab, et cetera. And we focus on healthcare professionals. I'm Len May DNA on Instagram, but Len May everywhere on LinkedIn, et cetera. I have a book. It's called Making Cannabis Personal that you can get on Amazon. And I also do a podcast called Everything is Personal because
Awesome.
that's what I believe.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks so much for coming on and elucidating and keep up the great work.
Thank you. I appreciate having me on.